September 20th, 2025 dawned with a sense of promise in the air. For Jose Daniel, it was more than just another day. It was the day he'd been working toward for years. The city was waking up, bathed in golden light, and Jose felt the weight of possibility on his shoulders. He carefully selected his best suit, the one he'd saved for special occasions, and straightened his tie with trembling hands. His resume, crisp and freshly printed, was tucked neatly into a folder. Today, he was interviewing for a project manager position, a role that could transform his life and help support his family back home. As he hurried down the bustling city streets, Jose silently rehearsed answers to potential interview questions, his mind racing with hopes and anxieties. Suddenly, his focus was broken by a commotion ahead. A woman stood stranded on the sidewalk, her high heel snapped, her face etched with panic and frustration. Dozens of people streamed past her, eyes averted, too busy or indifferent to stop. The city, for all its energy, could be a lonely place. But as Jose watched, he remembered his mother's words. True character is revealed not when things are easy, but when someone else needs you most. He hesitated for just a moment, torn between his own ambitions and the sight of someone in need. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped forward, offering his hand and a reassuring smile. In that instant, he risked his own future for the sake of a stranger. The woman, Alejandra, was clearly distraught. She explained, voice trembling, that she had an important meeting of her own, one that could determine her career. The broken heel was more than an inconvenience, it was a potential disaster. Without a second thought, Jose Daniel dashed into a nearby shoe store. He spent the last of his money he'd been saving for bus fare home, on a pair of elegant heels. Returning to Alejandra, he handed her the shoes, his own worries momentarily forgotten. Alejandra was stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude. In a city where kindness often goes unnoticed, this simple gesture meant everything. She thanked him, her voice thick with emotion, promising to pay his kindness forward. With barely a moment to spare, Jose wished her luck and sprinted off, his heart pounding, not just from the run, but from the adrenaline of having made a difference. He raced through the crowded streets, dodging commuters, hoping desperately that he wasn't too late for his own opportunity. As he ran, Jose couldn't help but reflect on his choice. He had put compassion before ambition, uncertain if it would cost him everything he'd worked for. But deep down, he knew he'd done the right thing. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that define us. Breathless and a little disheveled, Jose finally arrived at the office building. He paused outside the glass doors, gathering himself, feeling a quiet pride that went beyond any job title or paycheck. In a world that often values success above all else, it's easy to forget that the smallest acts of kindness can set the stage for the biggest changes. Sometimes, helping someone else is the very thing that changes our own story. The city was alive with possibility, and as the sun climbed higher, Jose Daniel's day and his life was just beginning. Jose Daniel arrived late. His heart pounded as he hurried through the glass doors, the weight of his dreams pressing on his shoulders. He had rehearsed every answer, pressed his shirt, and mapped the route twice. But life, as it often does, had other plans. A stranger in need on the subway had delayed him, and now, every second felt like a lifetime slipping away. 15 minutes that cost him everything. The clock on the wall was merciless, its hands already past the hour. He could almost hear the tick, echoing his regret. The receptionist sent him to the executive floor where Damaris, the assistant, met him with a cold stare. Her eyes flicked over him, taking in his nervous energy and rumpled suit. "You're late, the position's filled. We hired Mr. Paul Bastidas." Her words were final, like a door slamming shut. There was no room for negotiation, no hint of sympathy. His explanation about helping someone fell on deaf ears. Damaris barely glanced at his resume. The story of his good deed, the reason for his delay, seemed to vanish in the sterile air of the office. Defeated, he left, his dream slipping away. The city outside felt colder, the sun already dipping behind the skyline. Each step away from the building felt heavier than the last. Days later, just as hope was fading, Damaris called. "Our CEO Alejandra saw your resume. The only opening is janitor. Interested?" Her voice was neutral, but the offer was real. A lifeline, though not the one he'd imagined. It stung, but bills and family weighed on his mind. He thought of his children's laughter, the rent overdue, the groceries running low. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. Swallowing his pride, Jose Daniel accepted. He reminded himself that honest work was never beneath him, and that every journey had to start somewhere. even if it wasn't where he'd hoped. He told himself it was just a foot in the door. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something unexpected. He would work hard, no matter the job, and prove his worth. Each night, as the office emptied, he cleaned with care, taking pride in every polished floor and spotless window. Sometimes opportunity comes disguised as humility. The world rarely notices those who sweep the floors, but Jose Daniel saw every shift as a chance to learn, to observe, and to grow. Jose Daniel's journey was far from over. He carried ambition in his heart and a quiet determination in his eyes. He knew that every great story has a humble beginning. He started as a janitor, but he carried the heart of a leader. He watched, listened, and learned from the people around him, always searching for ways to contribute beyond his title. The company had no idea what was about to unfold. Sometimes the most remarkable people are hidden in plain sight, waiting for their moment. Every closed door can lead to an unexpected opening. For Jose Daniel, this was not the end but the start of a new chapter, one that would test his resolve and reveal his true character. He was ready to begin again, determined to turn this humble opportunity into something extraordinary. Paul Bastidas, the new project manager, was all swagger and no substance. He landed the job thanks to Damaris, not merit. Their alliance was built on favoritism, not skill. Paul's first assignment: analyze 3 major projects for a crucial partnership with Don Chio. He was lost. Terms like net present value and internal rate of return were foreign to him. Damaris, equally clueless, couldn't help. The company's future rested on their shaky shoulders. Their incompetence was about to be exposed. The stakes had never been higher. Jose Daniel donned a janitor's uniform, trading spreadsheets for mops. He worked with quiet dignity, cleaning offices and observing the company's inner workings. Late at night he noticed Paul struggling with financial data he himself could solve in minutes. Jose Daniel kept his distance, but concern grew. He overheard talk of a high-stakes deal with Don Chio. The company's fate was in the hands of someone unqualified. Though overlooked, Jose Daniel's loyalty deepened. He saw the storm coming, and knew he might be the only one who could help. Sometimes the best vantage point is from the sidelines. He waited, watching, ready. Pressure mounted on Paul as Alejandra demanded real answers. He fumbled through meetings, unable to explain basic financial terms. Word spread, Paul was a fraud. The finance team whispered, "How did he get hired?" Damaris tried to shield him, but her excuses wore thin. Desperate, Paul offered Jose Daniel money for help. Jose Daniel refused. "You need to take responsibility for your work." The truth was becoming impossible to hide. Paul's incompetence was an open secret. The company teetered on the edge of disaster. Integrity, or the lack of it, was about to decide everyone's fate. The moment of reckoning was near. Sometimes the right answer is simply to walk away. The deadline loomed large, and with every tick of the clock, Paul's anxiety grew. He scrambled to finish the report, cobbling together numbers and phrases that sounded impressive but lacked substance. In a haze of exhaustion and desperation, he finally submitted a document built on little more than guesswork and jargon, hoping no one would look too closely. But Alejandra, the company's sharpest analyst, saw through the facade instantly. She pored over the report, her eyes narrowing as she spotted glaring errors and inconsistencies. The numbers didn't add up, and the proposed strategy was not just flawed, it was reckless, putting the entire project at risk. Furious and disappointed, Alejandra stormed into Paul's office. Her voice was cold and unwavering as she delivered an ultimatum. "Fix this by morning or you're fired." The words echoed in the room, leaving no doubt about the seriousness of the situation. Panic set in immediately. Paul's mind raced as he realized he was completely out of his depth. He had relied on shortcuts for too long, and now with the spotlight on him, there was nowhere to hide. Damaris, his usual ally, was powerless to help this time. As the office emptied and the last footsteps faded away, Paul sat alone at his desk, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Outside, the city lights flickered, but inside, the stakes had never been higher. The company's future and $1 million deal hung by a thread, teetering on the edge of collapse. Paul's deception, once a shield, had now become a trap. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. He felt the sting of guilt and the cold realization that he had let everyone down. He was like a captain on a sinking ship, surrounded by rising water and with no idea how to plug the leaks. Every solution he thought of seemed to make things worse, and the sense of helplessness grew. The night stretched on endlessly. Paul stared at the clock, each minute dragging by as hope slowly faded. He tried to focus, but fatigue clouded his mind, and the answers he needed remained just out of reach. Sometimes the only way out of a crisis is to face the truth head-on, no matter how painful it might be. Paul knew this deep down, but admitting his mistakes felt impossible. For Paul, the truth was like a locked door, one he couldn't bring himself to open. Fear and shame kept him frozen, unable to take the first step toward redemption. Meanwhile, the company teetered on the edge. The boardroom was filled with tension, and the team's worried faces showed just how much was at stake. They needed a miracle to turn things around. But as dawn approached, a glimmer of hope began to emerge. Unbeknownst to Paul, help was quietly on its way, a chance for redemption, and perhaps a new beginning. As night fell, Jose Daniel saw Paul's despair. He felt conflicted. Paul deserved the fallout, but the company didn't. After Paul left, Jose Daniel slipped into the office and rebuilt the report from scratch. He calculated net present value, internal rate of return, and ran a Monte Carlo simulation. By sunrise, he'd crafted a flawless proposal. He left it on Paul's desk, erasing any sign of his presence. He didn't do it for recognition, but because it was right. The company was saved, if only someone would see the truth. Sometimes heroes work in the shadows. The fate of the project was now out of his hands. The big meeting arrived. Doncheo, Alejandra, and Paul gathered. Alejandra recognized the new report's brilliance. It wasn't Paul's work. Paul presented it anyway, but Doncheo quickly pressed him for details. Paul froze, unable to explain the analysis. The room fell silent. The lie was exposed. Alejandra intervened. "Mr. Bastidas is not the author." She called in Jose Daniel, still in his janitor's uniform. He explained the methodology with clarity and confidence, impressing Doncheo. The truth was undeniable. Doncheo smiled, recognizing real talent. The company's future shifted in that moment. Sometimes the right person is hidden in plain sight. The room erupted in applause for Jose Daniel. Paul and Damaris stood, exposed and silent. Alejandra's instincts had been right all along. The company had found its true leader. Doncheo insisted Jose Daniel lead the project. Alejandra agreed, firing Paul and Damaris for their dishonesty. Jose Daniel, stunned but grateful, accepted the role of project manager. Alejandra smiled. "And I owe you a new pair of shoes." His journey from janitor to leader was complete. Kindness, integrity, and perseverance had triumphed. The company was saved, and so was Jose Daniel's dream. Sometimes the right path is the hardest one, but in the end, it leads exactly where you're meant to be. Jose Daniel's story was proof good deeds come full circle. The future was finally his.